Welcome to Breaking Bread, hosted by me and the show bro Lando, a show where we break verbal bread with the quote-unquote enemy. Whenever Manchester City has an upcoming match, we will be here having a conversation with a supporter of City's upcoming opponent. Shout out to all of those watching on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter. Subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up, like the video, please and thank you. All you people watching the replay, appreciate you. This Saturday, high noon. You ready for this, Lando? It's a big game. It's high noon in the U.S., but in the early evening for the Brits, Manchester City welcome Newcastle to the Etihad. Newcastle reeling from a Chelsea defeat. Manchester City licking their own wounds from a self-inflicted draw at Anfield. Most stoked guests that we have to help us dissect this Magpies campaign and understand the upcoming opponent better. Rights for Coming Home Newcastle, alongside for SB Nation, Shady Gang. Give it up. Elijah. How's it going?
Hey, great. I'm glad to be back. I feel like I've popped in a few times here and there to talk my talk, hop on the stream, do the watch parties, all that kind of stuff. So it's always fun hanging out with the Shady Gang for sure.
Appreciate that. Lando, how are you doing? How's your Wednesday been?
It's good. It's good. I have enough time away from Liverpool, but enough time in front of me to look towards Newcastle and the FA match. And I know I have some time before that Arsenal damn team, but I'm so excited to get a chance to get Elijah's perspective here on Newcastle, some of the things that are happening in Champions League. We're gonna have an Eddie Howe conversation today. I demand the topic to be brought up. It's a conversation that Crunk and I have often gone back and forth on. So Elijah, I'm interested on your perspective, but I'm excited to be here, man. Excited to be here.
Love it. All right, well, we're gonna start off something easy, fun, light before we dig into it. Tell us, Shady Gang, a little bit about yourself, how you became a supporter of Newcastle United.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't want to be a sheep. In high school, I was all the homies had teams. Everybody was all on the Man U train, Liverpool, Spurs. And this is like 2010, 2011. So NBC like really took accessibility to the Prem to the next level. That was like, man, back when all you needed to have was the NBC Sports channel. You could log in online and watch whatever match you wanted, regardless of where you were. It's fun times. And so I kind of just stumbled into Newcastle fandom from just being like, I know I don't want to be a fan of any of the teams my friends were. And I watched a couple matches, fell in love with the atmosphere, loved the fact that they were kind of like a bit of an underdog, not, kind of outside looking in. No one I knew were fans of them. And so I was just like all in at that point. And one of the things I did was, I've actually never shared this part of it, is like, I was big in SB Nation at that point. Like it was like, I was 14, 15, something like that. I was probably 14. And it was like the beginning of when I think every like sports fan as an adult has that moment where there's like the 1 year where you like actually start to care about like the teams. Like you're always a fan, but then you're like, oh, like stats and like, let me read, like I'm into the rumors and all that kind of stuff. And so SB Nation, I was already tapped in with like all my Atlanta teams. And I was literally using like how like the communities were to gauge whether or not I'd like to be a fan of that team. So like I was in the Sunderland community. I was like, I'm not really feeling this. Like y'all are too angry all the time. And I actually tapped into the Man City community. I was like, no, I don't know any City fans, and they were pretty good. I was like, they're starting to pick up steam. I'm like, this might be a good one to hop onto. And then I settled on Newcastle. I was like, I was in the comments section chatting it up and all that kind of jazz, and people were really nice to me. Everyone was nice to me online. It's like, everyone seems pretty chill. Like nobody's annoying. So it's boring. That's how I ended up being a Newcastle fan. I never looked back. Little did I know, like that season, Newcastle finished 5th, and that was like the best season I saw until last year. So it was downhill from from the jump until very recently.
Hey, at least nobody's annoying.
Well, hey, I wasn't on Twitter in 2011. That was the issue. I didn't hop on until like 2012.
That's fair.
That's
That's
probably
fair.
yeah.
That's
But yeah,
fair.
nah. In the hey, it's all every fan base has their they have their ups and downs. I'm sure like you found your community of folks on the city side that I see y'all interact with on a daily basis. Everyone seems chill. And then there's also some people you probably not interacting with because you're like, hey man, you got a lot of negative energy. I'm not
constantly learning my lesson. Constantly
Yeah.
learning my lesson.
Yeah. That's it,
So-
man.
But the other thing to that also, I think sometimes in fandom, it's a commonality that we all share. It's great to have diverse folks and places, people from different places and all that, have that neutral ground that we all stand on. But in standing in that with social media comes just natural discourse of other topics and conversations that
Yep.
sometimes you start to see maybe past the neutral ground that we stand on. Sometimes I don't want to look
Mhm.
past it, Elijah. Sometimes I'd rather
Yeah.
just stay on the city ground or stay on the neutral ground and move from there. And so I
Yeah.
guess I'll segue to kits. Tell me about your first impression about the Newcastle tradition kit. I mean, the whole classic black and white, right? I
I'm
mean,
not
what?
gonna lie. That's a crazy segue because I was like, I'm thinking you're gonna ask me about like what some controversial stuff on Twitter. No,
Yeah, I
you
don't wanna
talking
go
about
there.
kids. No, I'm a fan of the black and white stripes. I like it. It's cool. It was definitely like there's been some ups and downs like since I became a fan. I think like the 2011 to like 2015. 2015 was probably like the last like that was
Dope.
the end of
Yeah.
that was the end of like the cool black and white stripes. And that had like the blue accents on it, and then it just was kind of like meh for a few years. And then actually, I really do like this season's home kit. I think it's cool. There's just a lot of like, it just feels the Salo logo like works better. Part of it was the Fun 88 logo, was just like not a great one for the home kit.
And it didn't have the central. It had that Korean or
offset,
writing. I didn't like that.
They're like, I will say, all-time great sponsor. Like, even though the relationship is ended with the club, I think officially, they're still very much like all about the banter. Like they really tapped in, and it's like that's a good partner to have. But like that logo, I mean, it was to the point where anytime there was like a secondary or third kit, like the Fun 88 logo looked better on those because you didn't have to use their stock like light blue that just kind of was bulky and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, it's cool. One of my favorite kits was there's a third kit. It had to be like 20. I was at Syracuse, so it had to be like 2017, I think. It's like a third kit that was inspired by the maroon and blue like hoop kit that the Newcastle had in the 90s. With the Fun 88 logo was gold and the accents were all gold. That's probably the best kit that Puma made when they had Newcastle. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the black and white stripes. I love it. It's an iconic look. It's classic. And it's really hard to mess it up. We've seen people mess it up, but it's pretty hard to mess up.
Yeah, I agree.
That was a good question. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know where he was going either. So I was here for the segue.
Fan friendly. Everyone loves kids.
Mm-hmm.
At least for the first 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Transfer talk. Want to move to that? Did you look at the moves made in the previous summer? We can talk about that. Maybe a little bit of FFP, and then I'm sure this upcoming summer is going to be chaos as well. Previous summer transfer window, Newcastle made some moves. Sandro Tonali, Harvey Barnes, Tino Livramento, along with borrowing Lewis Hall from Chelsea. You lost your lock legend in Alan St. Maximin in
Gucci
Wood, I guess. Injuries were a big problem for the club this season. You would think that bringing in 5 players would give your roster a good boost to battle injuries. So is it as simple as losing Tonali instantly put the club behind the 8 ball?
I mean, potentially. I think Yeah, I mean, the part of one of the bigger issues is that Newcastle didn't really, you lost like your attacking depth or like pretty early on. Harvey Barnes also was injured early on, even before I think he was like right before he got his big injury was like right before Tonali's suspension and all that kind of stuff. He just was on them apps, and them apps will get you. But if you're a professional athlete, you can't be on them apps. Like that's how that works.
Well, in Just Freelance, as we have this conversation, can we just try to stick in as many gambling puns as we possibly can? Because I just think it's an absolute fun game to play. And the notion that you guys took the chance, I'd say maybe the gamble on getting a guy like Sandro Tonali, and it really come from left field. I mean, I don't know what the odds were on possibly getting an Italian to come over to the Premier League, especially a cornerstone to their franchise. I mean, he's grand. He's MGM grand.
They definitely put all their chips on the table.
Yeah, and there's a buddy of mine, Martino, who he's a good follower, Martino Puccio. He's an AC Milan fan, and he's based out of the U.S. And he and I talked about it. And for him, how he phrased it was like kind of back to financial fair play. Like Milan had to sell someone, and and they've got a lot of really good pieces. And I mean, if you look at it from their standpoint, it's the largest outgoing transfer in club history for an actual Italian player there. So it worked out for them. That's how it happened. It's just like it felt like out of left field, but also Newcastle came with an offer that like Milan couldn't refuse. I think a lot of fans felt as if midfield was an area that needed to be strengthened. I think myself included. I think I even said this when I did this last spring. I felt as if a 6 was going to be the move, and they went with getting like another 8 to kind of be an upgrade over Sean Longstaff and keep Bruno as a 6. And maybe, down the road, they'll sign a 6. But they were linked to some 6s. It was just a crazy market for that position. Like y'all kind of were ahead of the game, and you got your world-class 6. And then everyone was like, man, we should do what Man City's doing and get a world-class 6. And then the market went crazy. And so like they were in for Lavia, like, and linked to him before the summer opened. And of course, like with how everything shook out, that was no longer a possibility. And so Tonali gives them honestly gives them a natural Bruno replacement, which I don't even know if y'all want to talk about the latest rumors out on the street, but like there's a potential that Bruno could be gone this summer if the right offer comes in. And there are some teams with money like City and PSG that are snooping around.
Don't want him.
Yeah, who if that happens, you have your replacement Tonali. So I don't know if that's 100%. It doesn't help because there were some injuries in the midfield, but it just was an absolute nightmare all season. You lose Harvey Barnes, you don't sign a third striker, and that complicates things because you have Callum Wilson, who like love him to death, but like just has not had a completely healthy season in like 5 or 6 years. And you got Isak, who is fine. He doesn't have like a crazy bad injury record. It's just like you can't have 2 guys. You need a third guy in there if you're going to have one guy who is not going to play half the games this season. And that's kind of what Callum Wilson. It's like Callum Wilson is good when he plays, but he only plays half the season. And so I felt like that was a big miss from Newcastle to not bring in a third striker. And then like the other thing that probably was a little bit frustrating from a depth perspective is that they went out and they got a left back and they got a right back, and neither one of them could get into the team for a while. Like Tino Livramento has been good, really good when he's played for Newcastle. And there was I think it's realistic to say, hey, he's probably not going to overtake Kieran Trippier, but Kieran Trippier had a really awful patch of a really awful run of form in like December, kind of right after the World Cup. A lot of the England players did. He had a really rough patch, and nothing like was really done to alleviate him and move him to the bench. He was responsible for a ton of goals during that run. And then on the other hand, like Tino Livramento played some left back when Dan Burn went out, and people were like, well, just start him at left back because Dan Burn is full of his own. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get into Dan Burn And then on the bench, you have Lewis Hall, who is on loan, on a loan to buy, who we have no idea what the conditions are for it, but he's a left back who actually torched Newcastle last year in the Chelsea-Newcastle matchup. And him not playing barely at all this season when you have Dan Burns struggling and you're not going to play Tino at left back. You've decided you're not going to do that. All right, well, why not play Lewis Hall? So it feels like you're not deep when you just don't play two of your signings and then one of them's injured and then the other signing that you make is suspended for the year. So it feels like you just lost players and you didn't actually gain any depth anywhere. And, you know, that's part of the Eddie Howe conversation is like he's loyal to certain players to a fault. But it's also like, to me, it felt like felt like the transfer strategy from the jump was lacking a couple key things. And part of that is financial fair play. Like they just said, hey, we want to get a third striker, but we cannot afford one. But at that point, it's like, well, then loan in a third striker. Like it's, you know, you can't have it both ways. You can't use that as a crutch and then like not explore the loaning options as well. And then, yeah, losing St. Maximin, that hurt. But that, even if we had him this season, I don't know how much of a difference it would have made with a lot of the injuries being in the midfield, a lot of them being in the defense as well, and just Newcastle not having the depth needed. And
especially for a guy who kind of gets injured himself sometimes.
Yeah. ASM is, he wasn't the healthiest guy in the world when he was at Newcastle. He especially with like, and part of that was he's one of those players similar to Jack Grealish, who just like it's not happening anymore. And I'm sure you guys are seeing the benefit of it now of like, when you're the guy on your team, you end up being one of the most fouled players in the league and you get a lot of just cynical tackles put in. And that happened to ASM a bunch. And so who knows, like this season, if that would have been the case with like so many other attacking options, like there's just no reason to try to make your strategy like dive at his legs and all that kind of jazz. But he had a ton of just hamstring and like calf issues as well, similar to Callum Wilson. So just the way he plays as well. It's a lot of step overs, a lot of burst, dynamic stuff, all that kind of jazz.
Could you imagine Maximin in this high energy hustle offense of Eddie Howe? Like I'm not sure how well that would work.
It didn't work. That's why he's not a player anymore. He did it. He was the only one not pressing, and it was like, all right, dude, like where I mean, it was pretty bad. It was very noticeable when like you have Almiron or Murphy, whoever is playing, tracking all the way back to help provide cover for Trippier, and like Alan St. Maximin's like up the pitch next to Callum Wilson, just waiting to be an outlet, and it's like waiting. It's like that's not what we need. And then at the same time, you've got on the other end, you've got him you've got Miggy pressing and Callum Wilson pressing, and then Alan St. Maximin just kind of standing there waiting for an errant pass instead of like actually trying to force an error. So
hurry up and get the ball, bro. I'm waiting.
Yeah, and again, that worked under Steve Bruce, where like they were sitting back and you just needed to get the ball to Alan St. Maximin and let him be a one-man counter. But like when you're trying to press as a unit, you need everyone to press. And unfortunately, I mean, I love him to death, but that just wasn't his strong suit. And I don't fault him for that. It is what it is. Some players are built for that, some aren't. It's the reason Ronaldo didn't work out at Man U. It's like they wanted to press. He didn't press, among other things. But like tactically, that was a big issue, is that he was a negative defender. And that's not the way Ten Hag wanted to play.
Yeah. FFP is putting everybody in a bad spot. It was announced the other day that PL financial changes are coming, similar to UEFA's financial sustainability rules, according to clubs. Allowing clubs to spend 85% of the revenue on squad costs. Newcastle currently needs to offload 40 billion euros by June, allegedly. However, under the new rules, you'd be fine. Actually, Newcastle would get about an extra 25 million euros to work with. Lots of players. And actually, let's sit here with FFP because you guys deal with it too. And it's always interesting because when like when I had Toffee Blue Cast on, they're Everton. They're raging against the machine. I'm like, you guys get it now. I feel like a lot of people get it now, but because they're going to change the rules, a lot of people are going to forget and easily start pointing at us. But I feel like if FFP, the way that it is, continues, everybody was going to get in trouble eventually because it was just going to be forcing everyone to constantly offload players in order to make something go.
Yeah, and also like part of it is like total revenue, and the UK is awful at like sports as a business, and this is just coming from like my
Truly.
background is sport management. So like I worked at USL, and I'm like I'm seeing USL for the folks who are not American. That's our second division in lower men's soccer. And I was in the club services division, which is like all revenue generated. And I'm thinking about how much these lower league US clubs were able to generate, and like seeing some of the numbers out of the UK on a yearly standpoint, I'm like, you need to know your worth as a brand. Like you could be charging way more, getting way more revenue in. And I think that's part of it is that like, and I think honestly, that's probably going to change with the influx of just like American influence, whether it's like a Darren Eales who is not American, but worked at a highly revenue, like a high revenue generating team here in the United States, in Atlanta United, that like really just understands how to make money. Or if it's just like the influx of American owners, which that's continuing to happen. I think it's going to be less of an issue. It's still going to be an issue because prices are always going to go up. But I do think like Prem teams are going to get smarter about the types of brand deals that they do. And that's going to play, it's going to have an effect. Like I think Everton's kind of a good example of like you had really marketable players. You've been a mainstay in the Prem. Your front of shirt sponsor should be more than what you were charging. And although it's not a ton, like in terms of like helping out, with FFP, every little cent helps when you get down to it. And as much money as you can generate as possible is what you need to do, even if you're going to still outspend your own revenue that you're bringing in.
And even an extra $10-20 million, that could be another youth player that you could potentially end up flipping for 50, 60, $70 million in a few years. It all could become big money if handled correctly. No, I'm with you. Lots of players contracts and lots of player contracts for Newcastle with 2 years left, and that's usually around the time where they're transferred or given extensions. Trippier, Wilson, Byrne, Schär, Lascelles, Joelinton, Longstaff, Dubravka. Oh man. Obviously there's rumors about Bruno G. Which of the aforementioned players would you expect Newcastle to want to hold on to? Because I'm gonna be honest, aspirations that Newcastle wants to go and be, I'm not sure who in that list. Maybe like Joelinton because I like his energy, but he's still just a sub. He's a backup dude. He's not going to be a starter if I get the players that I would want. Especially,
well, I mean, the other thing is you got to look at it differently. Like, for example, if you look at it from the Man City perspective, your team and your academy has been built so well that like you can afford to spend a lot of money on one player. And if you look at it from a Newcastle perspective, you have to constantly be making upgrades everywhere. And they didn't sell players. You still have to be able to sell players in order to buy players if you're Newcastle. So like, yes, Joelinton may be a bench player at Man City, but he's going to have to be a starter at Newcastle until they can sell and
I'm not even comparing him, and I don't even want to compare him to Man City. I'm just speaking generally, like top 6 aspirations. Who is that player that I would want to see on that squad? I don't even want to tie it to Man City. That could be anybody. That could be Arsenal. That could be Manchester United. That could be Liverpool. That could be West Ham and Aston Villa. I mean, I don't know how well he'd probably do okay on Aston Villa just because of Unai, but I wouldn't see him being like a starter also. It's just, and I understand what you're saying, that you have to do key steps. So who of those players would you hold on to then, and maybe, I guess, try to build elsewhere?
I also think like it depends on kind of what the system, and two, like kind of what you value in a player. Like he's high energy, but he's also like a solid defender. He can also play out wide, so you can do some fun stuff. Newcastle did last season was they played him and Willock, one is left wing, one is left central mid, and they swapped them a bunch. It just added a whole level of a whole new level of like to the attack. But I mean, and he's still a goal scoring guy. So I don't know if I would put him like as far low on the totem pole as you are now, especially considering like,
Not
I mean,
bad.
and and I've, trust me, I was there when we paid 40 million for him to be a striker that didn't. So I have to give him his flowers now. I mean, he's consistently getting called up to Brazilian national team and starting for them. So like, there's clearly value
That's
there.
fair.
There's some rumors that his extension's been agreed to. Bruno got a new contract with a release clause, so he's probably, if there's any Newcastle player that's going to get sold, I mean, like in terms of just without Newcastle having to say anything, it'd probably be Bruno. And his advanced analytics this year look pretty good. And then like pretty much the last month and a half, he's been carrying the team, and they've started to play him not as a 6, which is he's more of an 8, and that's his best position. That's what he plays when he's with Brazil as well. But I mean, I don't think there's a reason to really keep Dan Burn, but I also don't think there's a market for him. That's the other part, is like Newcastle are happy to let other players go, and they've got kind of the guys in waiting, but there has to be a market for those guys. So like for a while, everyone's like, we got to get rid of like Ryan Fraser, for example, because he's just wasting space, but like no one wanted him. And the players also. So the fun thing is like, you know, in some of the American leagues, like it's one thing to have a player with like low trade value, for example, but also like the contract, you're trading the contract as well. You don't have to do that negotiation as well. And so like when you look at like a Ryan Fraser is a really good example of this, of like, there were championship clubs who were like, yeah, we'll take Ryan Fraser, but also Ryan Fraser wanted to make Premier League money. And so then now everything falls apart because, yeah, sure, you may have a team that wants him, but if they can't afford his wages, they can't afford his wages. And they're going to move on to their next option. And they don't feel bad for you, whatever. And so that's the other part is like, is Dan Burn willing to take a pay cut to go to a lower Premier League table team? Is there even a market for him? We've seen how much he's been cooked this season. Trippier, sure, like I'm sure there's always going to be a market for him, but I also don't know. I mean, like Bayern wanted him this past winter, and Newcastle named their price, and Bayern was like, no, we're not going to pay this for this player, and everything kind of moved on. But I can see like guys like Almiron on their way out, just because there's a Harvey Barnes there. Nkunbe Minte is a guy they bought last summer who's been killing it in the Dutch league. I think he's going to probably work his way into the first team next season. So like Almiron and Murphy, you could probably sell them for like a combined 24, 25 million. That kind of helps you out. But I mean, everyone else, it's a matter of time. Cher is probably going to end up being a backup similar to Jamal Lascelles, could probably be on his way out as well. He was pretty close to leaving actually in the summer. There were some championship clubs who were wanting him even in the winter. So he seems to be a prime candidate to be sold. But I think Cher is content being a backup to whatever sort of better center back they bring in to be their spine along with Botman. And Burn, I'm sure if there's an offer out there on the table, Newcastle should be happy to let him go. The issue is Dan Burn has not done a lot this season to make himself someone that anyone would want to sign, unless you're kind of like newly promoted and you want a leader or captain kind of guy. But all the newly promoted teams next season are all going to be teams that were in the Prem already. Like they have good rosters. Like, are they going to waste 10, 15 million on an old left back who should be a center back that's 6'7"? Like, are they going to do that? Probably not. I wouldn't. If I were building the team, I would not waste my money on that. I'd rather buy a young guy that could pan out rather than an old guy that might pan, that I know what he is, and I know that that's probably not going to make my team all that much better.
So for some clarity purposes, I've brought up the wage structure here for Newcastle. Dan Burns on $55K a week. I mean, not talking about much here. The one that I thought was interesting, Kieran Trippier. Definitely agree that there's some value there. I wouldn't disagree there. 32 years old, 120K a week salary. My man's going to have to look himself in the mirror and really kind of discuss that pay cut depending on wherever he goes. But I do think there's potential Newcastle there. I think Elijah's point is spot on with the sense that while you've made some of these higher purchases like Isak, Tonali, Kamara's I thought was a really great deal, and I think there's really value there. You'll probably, if knock on wood, you do sell him, that's potentially a profit, I would say. But he's on 160K a week, and he's on your he's the highest on your wage bill. So the point I think he's really spot on when you think about it overall is there's value in some of these players in the sense that what they have to build a team, but the players that you would look to leave, there's not much value there. I don't think you're going to be getting much for a guy in Jacob Murphy, 35K a week salary, 1.8 million overall for a year for the year. It's just you're not getting a lot for him, you know?
Yeah, you're not. I mean, and that's the thing is like I'm sure Newcastle can sell Murphy and Almiron like for sure, but like you're not going to get that much in return for the combination of those two. Yeah. And then now
Miggy's 29.
Yeah, and now you have to try to figure out how to make your attacking rotation younger, knowing that Harvey Barnes, he had a freak injury season, so I'm sure he's fine. But like you've all right, sure you're going to go with Gordon and Barnes as your starting wingers, and maybe you have Minte come in. Sure, you maybe have Elliot Anderson as like a pseudo midfielder winger type thing, and sure throw Joe Willock into the rotation, but at the end of the day, like you probably want to go out and make an attacking signing to replace those two guys. And then that's expensive. Like what's the going rate for not even a great world-class guy, but an attacking talent under the age of 27 with some decent potential? You're looking at 40 mil plus.
Yep. Well, this is where I push back on this a little bit. Yeah. This is where I say, I don't disagree that there are players out there that have higher wage structure or higher markets and they're higher price tags. I'm going to acknowledge that Florian Wirtz, that Jeremy Frimpong, they are players. You know, I pluck out Leverkusen because like they're dope right now. They have assets.
Yeah, I better say they're about to get.
They're raking.
Everybody's about to be pulling from them this summer, I think.
Yeah, but and I don't want to be that snobby City fan, but I sit here and I stand and tell you, we got Stefan Ortega on the free. Yeah. We got Julian Alvarez for 19 million from River Plate. We did a great deal with River Plate to go ahead and get Echeverri, and now we're going to loan him out next year. There are deals there if you look. Now, if then you say to me, go back to the conversation, well, Lando, I mean, you're recruiting, you're scouting, your infrastructure, it's all built for you to be able to find those gems. Then I say to you, I humbly say thank you. That is where the difference is, and that is where I say you are correct.
But I think that's the biggest thing right now is like you guys have to remember pre-PIF, Newcastle did not have a sporting director, like at all. They're like Dan Ashworth, like and currently they don't have one. Like Dan Ashworth's going to Man U, like he's just on gardening leave right now.
Your temporary dude is the dude who was on the documentary, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so it's like they're like it's easier. No, it's not easier. I'm just going to say, like, you also have the academy to back, hold your laurels on as well. It's like you have a great academy. Newcastle aren't there yet. So it's just a really awkward position that I think there's a reality check for fans of like, hey, like, it was great making Champions League. It was sick. It was cool. It was fun. But like right now, in order to get Newcastle to be a team that's consistently pushing for top six, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, we got a lot of work to do internally. There's some guys that need to be slowly replaced over time. I think there are some Newcastle fans that thought like overnight it's going to happen. And it's like, there is no team in the world where it was overnight. Everyone thinks that the City stuff happened overnight, but no, that was years. It was years. And there were players that they didn't see success until they sold some of the players they initially brought in. Like that's how it works, especially when you're up against established clubs with money, with academies, with sporting directors that know the game really well. Yeah, sure, maybe Man U is going to fire Ten Hag. Yeah, maybe Chelsea will fire. But at the end of the day, Man U's academy is more established than Newcastle's. Chelsea's academy literally just beat Newcastle's youth team, their PL2 team, 7-1. So clear there's a gap. Like, and I think that's the part that Newcastle fans sometimes tend to forget when we get into these transfer discussions, because everyone's like, let's just buy all these guys. One, we can't because of FFP. Two, we have to offload players in general to make spots for these guys. And three, like, you can take a risk and get a world-class player at winger when you think you have a really good midfielder in your academy. So you're like, we don't need to strengthen in the midfield right now. We can take that risk and find a guy who's who we can take a gamble on as a winger that's going to cost a little bit more. Newcastle don't have that luxury right now. Every good academy player at Newcastle that you're seeing is currently playing right now. Like, that's it. Yeah. It's Lewis Miley. It's Sean Longstaff. I mean, there's some guys out on loan, but at the end of the day, they're not ready for the Prem yet. Minte is probably the closest to being ready for the Prem, and that's next season. So we'll see.
Yankuba, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Yankuba Minte. I mean, he's been solid for Feyenoord. He's played in all their Champions League. Are they Champions or Europa? He's played in all their European matches, and he's played pretty well. And I think there's a lot of. I think they were pleasantly surprised with the loan. And they had a guy, Garang Cole, who they got from Australia. He had a pretty disappointing loan spell last season. This season, been all right, but yeah, I don't know. Is what it is. I'm curious to see what happens this summer, though.
Do you think I'm gonna play devil's advocate here? I'm not even gonna play devil's advocate. I'm gonna play kind of a little bit of a narrator and kind of set you up for this, lead you into it. It will be leading the witness, I guess you would say. This concept of FFP, right? The notion that you can't spend even though your club can if they want it. Is it frustrating to think that the academy and it not being built and the foundation, the structure, do you think it could potentially help Newcastle and the surrounding city and its youth development, helping kids and structure and building better support for the growth of the game? And over time, maybe 10 to 15 years, you can eventually get that homegrown product. Also, and I know that's just kind of leading you because I just told you it was going to be. Can you tell me what the fuck it means to win something organically?
That's okay. One, I'll answer the second one. That's like, what
does that mean?
Like, I'm in marketing, and so I'm a king of buzzwords, and that's a buzzword. I'm not sure what that means. Like even if you look at like trophies that were won in the past, like they were still buying and selling players back then. Like that's how it's been in football for 40 years. I don't know.
You mean Joelinton didn't grow in the tree back there in the Newcastle Academy? Yeah. I didn't know that. I thought Joelinton was growing on the Newcastle grounds.
It's some people might think. I think the academy part, like, I can't speak on Newcastle town. I will say Newcastle is there is nothing to do in Newcastle besides be a Newcastle fan.
That's very clear. I've seen in the documentary.
Yeah, like it's in the documentary. They've got Geordie Shore, which is like Jersey Shore. And if you think about, if you're American and you're like, what is there to do in New Jersey? And you think about it, and there really is nothing but be a sports fan and go to the beach. That is how Newcastle is. And I know if there's Newcastle fans who hear this, they're gonna come at me. But it's like, I'm sorry, I'm from Atlanta.
That's valid, bro. What do you mean?
Atlanta, we have a strip club that's known more for its wings than anything else. So it's like there's levels to this. But like at the end of the day, for like the academy perspective, like I think building the academy is important because FFP is, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. And like, I guess the argument against having it in place is like, just let clubs fail. And like, then it's like, yeah, that's kind of what administration's for and all that kind of jazz. And like, that's going to happen regardless. And I don't know if it's as unfair as like it's brought up from a UEFA perspective, because I do think like, part of that is on the leagues themselves. Like if teams were mad about how much money Barcelona and Real Madrid were spending, like the fee structure and how teams are paid out in La Liga is terrible. Like it leans itself to just pay essentially Barcelona and Real Madrid the majority of the earnings, the way that they have it set up. So it's like, of course those teams feel as it like people are like, it's unfair. They could spend all that much. punish the league. Like, I think a standardized like allocation of funds would make more sense than just punishing clubs on a case by case basis. But I don't work for UEFA. I don't work for FIFA. Who cares what I think?
How dare
But
you
I
make
think
sense?
yeah, I think the big thing about academy stuff is that it helps with financial fair play, because even if like Yankumbe Mente costs probably like $4 million for Newcastle, if he turns into anything, that's if he's sold at some point in the future for at a minimum 25, 40 mil, who cares? You've
Him
made
alone, he goes for 30.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, and so that I think that's the big like push for why Newcastle have cared too much about the academy, is that like that's kind of what Chelsea's been doing, is that like for a while they had all these young prospects that like they could just sell for absolutely insane amounts of money, and people are like, well, how are they spending this amount of money, blah blah blah. It's like, well, look at who they've sold from their academy, like, and where they are now. Like, they're about to get 30 mil or 30 to 40 million for Lewis Hall, who made like 10 appearances for them because Newcastle did a loan to buy. And it's like, that's the kind of revenue that you need in order to continue to make some of these big money purchases, is that you need to have a strong enough academy that you're able to convince anyone to buy any of your players for 20 mil. And it's like, there's so many failed Chelsea academy guys that end up elsewhere. And it's like, you look at where they ended up, and it's like, oh yeah, this guy got sold for 15 mil. This guy got sold for 20 mil. This guy got sold for 30 mil, and he's a flop at Chelsea. And then you do the math, and it's like, well, wait a minute. In 3 years, they sold 13 academy players for a total of 125 million. That's all profit. And I think that's like, that helps you on an FFP perspective, is that like, oh yeah, no, it may seem like these guys are busts, but like, we sold them and it cost us nothing on the books to develop these players and sell them. Whereas like, even if you do the kind of MLS route of like, we're going to buy this like young Argentinian guy for 10 million and sell him for 30 million, you still have that initial cost of 10 mil. That's going to always count against you. And so that's kind of the argument for investing in the academy, is that it's essentially a cash cow, and that's how Chelsea have done it. And it's worked. Like they can spend whatever they want. They spend $1 billion in 2 windows, and it's fine.
Also, shout out to Thiago Almada.
Oh yeah.
Let's keep it moving. I want to talk about Eddie Howe, because perfect timing to laugh, because that's how I felt about him. Because that's exactly how I felt about him. I never really was moved by the dude. I thought he deserved what he deserved at Bournemouth. There's also a reason why they have kind of struggled to grow. Also, like, people kind of was like, was he struggling at Bournemouth? Is it Bournemouth or is it Eddie Howe? And we're seeing it at Newcastle. I mean, he seems like a great dude, but he needs a better staff around him. I don't know. I know the fans, supporters, they enjoy him, but I don't know. He just, when you see him on the pitch and his face, he just seems like
real beady-eyed,
constantly loading all the time and just trying to figure out
things. Racist, that's what we're seeing. Wow, he doesn't like Eddie Howe. That's crazy.
Wait,
I'm trying to get you a good clip going. I'm trying to get you viral on Twitter. I'm helping you out, man.
I get myself in enough trouble. You do not need to put me in trouble.
Constantly loading is a beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah, I will. Okay, so this is. I will give you the honest, like, straight up, unbiased opinion of Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe is what Newcastle need right now. Like, right now. If you look at this roster, is this a roster that you think, like, look at it up and down, is this a roster you think is, one, consistently challenging for a Premier League title, 2, consistently trying to win cups, 3, consistently in Europe every year? You could argue maybe 3. I wouldn't argue that.
I need you to define Europe.
Champions League. That's what people call it. Okay, yeah. Like, okay, so
I'm looking at the roster and I'm answering your questions.
And so I think, like, Eddie Howe, I've always said this, like, Eddie Howe's seat is never hot because he's the manager that said, I'll come in and fix this mess. And to his credit, when he came in, he got Newcastle from 19th to 10th, did his job. Next season, had a great run, got him to 4th. He's a player's guy, blah, blah, blah. But he has his flaws. Like, there's been times where he's stuck to certain players. We've already kind of alluded to that. Like he's a big fan of Dan Byrne for some reason. He's stuck with certain players, but that's also been a positive at time. Like he kept playing Miguel Almiron at times, and then that turned into Miguel Almiron having one of the best runs of his entire career. So that's just kind of the personality he has. Like any interview he's done, he's very much like I care about the development of my players. And that's kind of what you need. He's just there to kind of be a caretaker. He's good enough to make sure you don't get relegated. And that's kind of what Newcastle need right now. Will Eddie Howe be at Newcastle in the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? I don't think he will. I think, unless he takes a big step forward managerially, like I don't think that's the case. And I will say, like Eddie Howe at Bournemouth to Eddie Howe at Newcastle is a different person altogether. He spent some time in his year off, like he did like 3 months at Atletico Madrid under Diego Simeone, just learning how to build the defense, and then came back and built a good defense for the first time in his entire coaching career. And like with all due respect, like I think like what he did at Bournemouth is impressive. Like I think people don't know he was there from like League 2 all the way up to the Prem. And he hit a ceiling and he went and bettered himself so that he could come back and surpass that ceiling. I think this season has been particularly tough because there's been a mixture of Eddie Howe, what are you doing? Like type of stuff, but also like what do you want him to do? Like there were multiple times this season where we named 2 keepers on the bench multiple times this season. And that's never a good sign. That means that you have no one available. Yeah, exactly. So it's like there's a level of like, all right, like what do you want him to do? Like Newcastle are losing 1-0, but like who do you want? You want him to sub on Matt Ritchie? And then he did that 2 weeks ago, and Matt Ritchie scored, and like Newcastle drew it. It's like I said that as a throwaway joke, and then it happened, and that's what we're dealing with. Like, you've got a guy who should be coaching, coming off the bench and scoring for you in order to save like a 2-2 draw. So I understand the Eddie Howe hate, and I do think Newcastle fans in particular at times tend to overreact to some of the Eddie Howe stuff, because I'm like, this season is a wash in my opinion of like, hey, like once you lose Isak for months, Gordon for months, you lose Tonali for the year, like the odds are against you. You lost Trippier for a month. Like there's only so much you can do. Like if your goal was to get another top 4 spot, you needed what happened last season, which is everything to go your way. Like they had decent injury luck last season. They won games they weren't supposed to, and you had players overperforming. That's how they got to a Champions League spot last season.
Quality draws. I feel like a definition for last year was quality draws. Newcastle equals New Jersey. That was an amazing comparison.
Yeah, and I got a lot of flack when a while ago when I said Newcastle was like Buffalo, and that's also one of my favorite comparisons because like town wise and like fan wise, like a Buffalo Bills fan and a Newcastle United fan would be best friends. Yeah, truly. I got a lot of slack for that because I said Newcastle wasn't a pretty city, and I'm like, all right, let's calm down. Like, you guys have bridges and sunsets and rivers. That's cool. Whatever.
Just for more fun to the add-on joke there, Matt Ritchie's 33 years old. He's your second oldest player on the roster. Do you know who's your oldest player?
Is it Dan Byrne?
No.
Who is it? Is it? I don't know who it is.
Let me confirm. Where the hell is Dan?
I think Dan might be 31.
No, he's not. Yeah, he's 31. Dubravka, 34 years old.
Yeah, and he's a keeper, so whatever. Yeah. And he's our backup keeper. Like that's the other thing. We lost Nick Pope for like 3 months. He's still not healthy. So I don't know. That's why I'm like, I will say this: the seat will be warm next season. It will be warm next season if you're not finishing probably in the top 7, 6. I think the seat's pretty warm for Eddie Howe because it's really more so because like at this point, if nothing happens this summer, you'll have Bruno and Tonali. That's a very expensive midfield pairing. Yeah. You'll have Joelinton, you just got on a just re-signed. You've got Isak again, who's obviously really good. Like there's that, and you've got whoever you add this summer. So. And at this point, this summer, like you should be able to formulate a solid starting 11 because, hey, what do Newcastle need? They probably need like another 6, a winger, They probably need a 6, a winger, or center back. And if you fill 2 out of those 3 positions this summer, you've kind of got what you need, at least from a starting 11 perspective, to go out and actually make some noise if everything goes somewhat well and you've got depth behind you. Like, if you can bring Almiron off the bench, you're probably in a better spot than having to start the whole match. That's just how it is.
In fairness to your question, 1 out of the 3 was a yes. Your second question was, can this team compete for cups? And I think yes. I think you can compete for a Carabella, which leads us, or an FA,
right.
which leads us.
And hey, they made a cup final last season. Like they made the Carabao Cup final last season. So I think that's definitely on the cards. Like, yes, they should be competing for cups at this stage. So yes, I would agree with that.
I do. Let's quickly talk about the roster before we get to the match and score predictions and stuff like that. Who on the team this season do you feel has been a standout, has surprised you, has made you proud that they represent Newcastle United?
I'm going to go 2 because it does feel like the first half of the season, it was Anthony Gordon. Like, he was on an absolute tear, absolute tear, and was just responsible for almost every goal, it felt like, from whether he was assisting, whether he was winning the free kick, or whether he was the one scoring. So he's up there for sure. And I honestly think they do their like professional football association, whatever, their like writers association, player of the year stuff, like yearly instead of like by each season. I think he'll win it for this next year because he's been that good. I will say, like, recently it's been Bruno, in the sense of like Bruno's been one of the only reasons why Newcastle has stuck around in some of these matches. He's looked really good when they've played him as an 8, and given how injured the midfield has been, with Joe Willock missing a large chunk of the season, Joe Ellington going down, having to play a 17-year-old Lewis Miley, having no Elliot Anderson, who was a nice little breakout midfielder last season, and then having to rely on Sean Longstaff, who is what he is, and having no Tonali. Like, Bruno's had to be the one sort of constant in the midfield all season, and that's a tough ask. Is to, hey, we're going to take all of the decent players, and they're not going to be available to play alongside you for the majority of the season. And he's played a lot of matches with a 17-year-old Lewis Miley, who's been a pleasant surprise, and Sean really Longstaff, who is who he is at this point. And so we'll just leave it at that. Like,
damn.
I like Sean Longstaff. Nice guy.
Yeah.
Probably not who I if my life depended on a player scoring for Newcastle or doing anything positively offensively for Newcastle, Sean Longstaff, I'd take Fabian Schär scoring over Sean Longstaff to save my life. I'm good, 100% serious.
See, that you will get flack from on the fucking Newcastle fans.
They like Longstaff, but they're like, he can't finish worth a damn.
They gave him so much love on that documentary. Isn't he your homegrown guy, and he's always been there? And
think about it.
Top porno name, right? Longstaff.
In the entire great. In the entire Mike Ashley era, there's been 2 academy players that have been decent, and it's Andy Carroll and Sean Longstaff. That's Carroll. It. Of course, they love Sean Longstaff. That's the only positive thing that came out of Newcastle for the last 10 years. Yeah. Like that's how that is.
That's valid. That's very valid.
Like, it's just what it is. I mean, shout out to Matty Longstaff, his younger brother, playing in Toronto. So that should be fun.
Hey,
I'll
keep an eye out for him now that I know that.
Yeah, and I think he had the assist on like the crazy wonder goal from.
Oh
CA. It was like it's one of those like assists that like he just passed him the ball and CA did literally everything else. Like, but yeah, he had the assist.
Got the assist though. Yeah,
the legend of Brody Longstaff begins.
Yeah,
look at that.
On the other end of the spectrum, from some players that you've enjoyed, who has disappointed you? Who has been someone this year where you're just like, They just don't got it.
Oh, it's Dan Bird. I don't even have to think twice about that. Because when Dan Bird came in, he filled a need. Like he was also playing center back, which was fine. And like we literally did not have a left-footed center back. And so like great pickup, great. Last season he had his moments where it was like, okay,
he balled out. He balled out.
Yeah, he balled out as a left back. It was like he was using his size and length to like completely frustrate wingers. And then this season, he turned 31 and it went downhill from there. Like that's what happened.
That's it.
And he just been getting cooked. He looking like barbecue chicken out there. Like it's
he
bad.
is.
And so like it's like one of those
slow roasted.
There was a week. I think it was like Forest. It was like a run where we had like Forest and like a couple other teams that were like, you should be beating these teams
this year.
And yeah, this year. It was literally like 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
It's like Luton. Yeah, go on. I was fucking scratching my head looking at this, man.
Well, because like it was one of those things where it's like the only calling card these teams have is that they have a really fast right winger, like fastest in the league. Yeah. Like one of the and Eddie Howe goes, you know who would go up against a really pacey winger this season? You know who would do really well in that situation? The slowest guy on the back line, Dan Burn. And it's just every single time it's like, okay, like logically, I'm starting someone, not even like it doesn't matter if you think Tino Livramento is a better defender or Dan Burn. It's just like I'm gonna start someone who I don't think is going to get absolutely cooked with balls over the top.
Yeah.
And like Eddie Howe was like, no, I'm gonna stick with my guy. He'll get out of it.
He'll figure it out.
And unfortunately for Newcastle fans, he like scored during that stretch at some point, and then he of course cemented his place even more. But there was like a match, it might have been the Luton match. It was Luton or the Forest match where Dan Burn was getting cooked so bad, Eddie subbed him off at halftime, and then Tino came on, and Newcastle scored like literally within 10 minutes of him coming on, and didn't allow the other team to score. And it's like, well, we could have had this from the start if we didn't start the slowest player in the Prem at left back. Just don't get it. And part of it's not even his fault. It's that's on Eddie Howe. Like that's 100% on him. Like you have a guy who's comfortable playing left back who, yeah, sure, he's a right back, but he's comfortable playing left back. Just start him over Dan Burn. No one's going to be mad. In fact, we'll all be really happy. Actually, it'll be the opposite.
Well, let's end here with how you think the match is going to go. Score prediction. It's going to be tough. Newcastle are coming to the Etihad. It's a home match for Manchester City.
I'm going to say, who's it going to be tough for? Because it's definitely not going to be tough for y'all.
Shit.
I mean, you guys are always, even if it's just for like 60 minutes, it's going to be a very difficult 60 minutes. But I don't know. You guys are going to come. Game plan. There's only so often you can keep losing or not looking tough. There's still so much of the season to go. I don't know. I will. And our play just hasn't been great, home or away at this moment. Yeah. Yes, we beat Luton Town, and then Luton Town went and did what they did today. Like this league makes no sense sometimes. So I don't know. And it's a cup competition. We know Pep is going to start Ortega because he has no choice, but I don't know. How are you feeling? What do you think this match is? How do you think this match is going to go? What do you think the score predictions are? Give me a score prediction.
I mean, I'm curious to see if Pep does any rotation. I don't think he will because we've got international break and stuff coming up as well. So it's like it feels like if Man City plays their strongest team, it's a much better and more cohesive, strongest team than Newcastle could put out altogether. And like Newcastle also still have a lot of injuries. You're missing some physicality in midfield with Joelinton. Joe Willock's back, and that's great. So sure, whatever. Callum Wilson's still out. Like he's still out. There's Gordon's injured right now as well. Trippier's
he came off in that Chelsea game.
So it's like if you're looking from like we're missing a lot of guys, and the only thing that I think could result in Newcastle like pulling out a result here is if the guys are like, guys, we need to win a cup for the city, and they do like a fucking like like one of those movie sort of like, hey, let's all rally together and win one for the town type of stuff. And like, sure, like there's a reason that happens in movies and not in real life. Because in real life, I'm sorry, if there's a team that's like one of the best teams in the world and you're going up against them, sometimes the power of hope just doesn't work to propel you to victory. It just doesn't work like that sometimes. So I don't think Newcastle are going to come out and honestly even have a good performance. I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a 3-1, pretty comfortable win. Holland with the brace, that kind of type of that type of stuff. I just don't foresee a world in which Newcastle, especially because like one of the calling cards for Newcastle against Man City since Eddie Howe's come in is one, they've played them well when at St. James's. At Etihad, it hasn't been great. And two, like the defense has been pretty solid. And this season, the defense has not been solid. So it's like the two things that Newcastle could rely on are not factors anymore in this stage. So I think it'll be a 3-1 win. Unless the power of friendship and hope propel Newcastle to make it further in the FA Cup, to win one for the city and revitalize the community. But that's not happening. So, oh well.
I thought those partly the lines of Captain Planet.
Yeah, basically.
Basically, I liked it. It can be repurposed. And it is just like City women playing Tottenham over and over and over again. We are playing Newcastle over and over and over again.
Daniel's right.
Hey, we are providing quality entertainment to everyone in the Middle East. So that's like, because that's what these are the clubs they're tuning in to see. So this is exactly what we need to do.
Lando, what are your thoughts on the match? How do you see it going?
Shit, you guys, I'm nervous as hell about this. I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
Have you seen our defense lately?
Yeah. Have you seen our attack lately?
Alexander Isak, I was about to ask you, is Alexander Isak still playing? If the answer is yes, I'm fucking scared.
He is. They have to give him the ball, though. That's the issue. That's been the issue.
He's just up there by himself.
Absolutely marvelous.
And then you take away the one guy that's like great at creating chances for Newcastle. And I mean, like the good, I guess the only positive is that like Newcastle are going to basically just be swinging in balls left and right because now they're forced to play Almiron on the left and Murphy on the right, and they're just both going to be whipping in crosses. So that could be something to be on the lookout for. But I don't know. Like, I love Isak, but I don't know if he can single-handedly take down Man City. And if he can, he might be gone this summer. Like he might. Somebody's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, we going hey, run it to Isak real quick." That's crazy.
That's wild.
I mean, highest bidder, you know.
I feel
he's a baller, man.
He's a baller, and it's weird. It's weird going from never having a double-digit goal scorer to having like last season having 2 in Wilson and Isak, and then Isak just like misses games. I remember not having a striker and having Gordon as a false 9, and I'm like, that's kind of whatever. Like it's been a rough season for the strikers. And then looking up and it's like, oh wait, he has 11 goals. All right, that's wild. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Well, before we get you out of here, please plug yourself. Let listeners, viewers know how they can find you and the things that you do.
Yeah, I mean, if you honestly care about just Premier League soccer, all that kind of jazz, you can follow. I tweet from Coming Home in UFC on Twitter, as well as CHN_radio on match days. But if you want to just talk about sports and you want to see funny memes, you want to be if you're not black and you want to be exposed to Black Twitter, I do a lot of retweeting for my personal at Elijah New, which is like KNEW, not NEW. But yeah, you follow me there. It'll be a lot of Atlanta United stuff, a little bit of Newcastle stuff, a little bit of Hawks stuff, a little bit of Brave stuff, and then a lot of just memes, funniness, all that kind of jazz. That's where we're at. That's it. That's all you need. And of course, you can check out the site, comingofnewcastle.com. My guy Antonio in Spain is putting in work. He's putting in a lot of work and writing a lot of really good stuff, and really has his finger on the pulse. And it's cool. Newcastle's in an exciting stage right now. So if you're missing the nostalgic aspects of City years ago, there's a lot going on. New stadium, club legends being pushed back into the fold, and of course, like, again, the team itself, it's exciting times. Players are going to get sold. Newcastle are trying to find these hidden gems and also make these splashes. So yeah, tap in all of that. It's fun.
Hey, and all of our information is scrolling on the bottom. We will be back tomorrow for the lit stream, and then we have some kickoff shows just kickoff shows this weekend. I was like, watch ons? Nope, just kickoff shows this weekend.
Hey, if y'all are streaming Saturday, I might have to tap in until my feelings get hurt when we're down 3-0. Like, hey guys, I'm gonna just watch the second half by myself.
Hey, we can chat about other things. We can just banter and just chat crap the entire time. Sometimes that happens.
Listen, when Isak scores on his first shot on goal at the Etihad, I will be there and I will warn you.
I will just say, hey,
happened all fucking year,
I said 3-1. That's the one. You talking about Isak like y'all don't have the robot Holland on your side? Like, come on now.
Have you seen the robot lately? He's been glitchy.
Hey, trust me, I have seen it because he's on my fantasy team, and I'm like, hey, brother, I'm have to stop capping you if you go putting in these types of stinkers. Like, come on now.
Especially when your ass puts up 5 in the FA when you could have did it somewhere in the Prem.
Exactly. That's what
that must have hurt anybody who's got him in the Prem, and it's like, damn.
Yeah.
Sorry, y'all. That's why I don't do it. That's exactly why I don't do it. Well, you know the vibes. Shady Gang, Shady Gang, Shady Gang.